For a creature with obsidian scales and wings that could span 15 feet when fully extended, this was no easy task. He kept his wings folded tight against his back, his tail curled around the chair legs, his head angled down toward his datapad. The back corner of the advanced telemechanics classroom had become his territory over 3 years, not because he chose it, but because no one else would sit within 3 rows of him. The morning lecture hall filled with the usual sounds of students chattering, bags dropping, chairs scraping. Travis watched from behind his screen as a Centauran student started toward the row in front of him, then noticed who sat behind. The student veered left, choosing a seat on the opposite side of the room. This happened every day. Travis no longer felt the sting of it. He had gone numb to the rejection somewhere during his 2nd semester. Professor Halvern entered and began the lecture on gravitational wave detection. Travis took notes with meticulous care, his clawed fingers surprisingly precise on the interface. He loved this subject, the mathematical elegance of how massive objects bent space-time itself. Energy physics came naturally to dragons. Their bodies were living fusion reactors, after all. But he never raised his hand, never volunteered answers, never drew attention to himself. Being invisible was safer than being noticed. When class ended, Travis waited. He always waited until most students had left before packing his materials. It avoided the awkward moment when groups would form in the aisles and he would have to navigate around them, watching them press themselves against the walls to maintain distance. Today, a Vossen student dropped her stylus near his desk. She looked at it, looked at him, and walked away without retrieving it. Travis picked it up and left it on her empty seat. The cafeteria was worse than classrooms. Travis had stopped going there 4 months into his first year. Now he ate in his quarters, a small single room in the oldest dormitory building. The housing administration had been apologetic but firm. His roommate requests had all been denied. No species wanted to share close quarters with a dragon. So he lived alone, studied alone, existed alone. He was one of 3 dragons at Galactic Confluence Academy, which housed 40,000 students from 200 species. The other 2 dragons were graduate students who kept to themselves. They had nodded at him once in passing, a gesture of acknowledgement, but nothing more. Even dragons, it seemed, found it easier to remain separate. That afternoon, Travis had comparative species biology, a new elective he had chosen because it fit his schedule. He entered the classroom early, as always, and made his way to the back corner. The room slowly filled. A group of human students clustered in the middle rows, laughing about something. 2 Kelleran filter breathers took seats near the air circulation vents. A Triloxian in environmental suit chose the front row. Then Travis noticed the pattern he had seen 1,000 times before. As students realized a dragon occupied the back corner, they adjusted their seating choices. An empty buffer zone formed around him. 3 seats in every direction remained vacant. Students would rather sit on the floor than sit near him. The professor had not yet arrived, but already Travis felt the familiar weight of isolation pressing down on his shoulders. The door opened again. A human rushed in, slightly out of breath, scanning the room for available seats. Most spaces were taken now, except for the obvious empty zone. The human had dark hair, carried a worn bag covered in patches from various planets, and wore the expression of someone who had sprinted across campus. Travis watched, expecting the human to ask someone to move, or to take a floor spot, or to leave and try a different section. Instead, the human walked directly toward the back corner, directly toward the empty seats, directly toward him. The human dropped his bag on the desk beside Travis and slid into the chair. Then he turned, extended his hand in the human greeting gesture, and smiled. Not a nervous smile or a forced smile, but a genuine, easy smile. "Hey, I'm Rate. Mind if I sit here?" Travis stared at the offered hand. Around them, the classroom had gone noticeably quieter. Other students were watching this interaction with expressions ranging from shock to concern. A dragon and a human, sitting side by side. It was not forbidden, but it was certainly unusual. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, only 80 years since first contact. They had their own reputation as Deathworlders, coming from a planet that most species considered a nightmare of gravity, predators, and disease. Travis realized he had been silent too long. He carefully extended his own hand, conscious of his claws, and gently grasped Reed's hand in what he hoped was an appropriate shake. The human's grip was warm and firm. "I am Travis," he said quietly. "You may sit wherever you wish." Reed grinned and settled into his seat, pulling out a datapad and stylus. "Thanks. I'm always late on Tuesdays. My advanced chemistry lab runs over." The professor entered and began the lecture on chemical communication between species, how different biology led to different molecular signals. Reed paid attention, occasionally jotting notes. Halfway through the class, he leaned over slightly. "Do you have an extra stylus?" "Mine just died." Travis silently handed him one. Reed accepted it with a quiet thanks and continued taking notes. Such a small interaction, so ordinary, yet Travis felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. When the lecture ended and students began packing up, Reed handed back the stylus. "See you Thursday," Reed said casually, as if they had been sitting together for weeks. Travis watched him leave, watched other students give him questioning looks, watched Reed ignore them completely. For the first time in 3 years, Travis felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. 3 days felt like an eternity. Travis arrived at comparative species biology 15 minutes early, telling himself he was not waiting for anyone specific. He took his usual seat in the back corner and tried to focus on reading ahead in the textbook. The words blurred together. He kept glancing at the door. Students filtered in gradually. The same pattern emerged. Seats filled everywhere except near him. Travis felt the familiar resignation settling over him like a heavy cloak. Of course Reed would sit elsewhere today. He had probably asked around about dragons, learned about the planet burnings, the wars, the reasons why his species lived in isolation now. Everyone eventually learned. Everyone eventually left. The door opened again. Reed walked in, not rushing this time, and his eyes scanned the room. When he spotted Travis, his face brightened. He walked straight to the same seat as before and dropped his bag. "Hey, Travis, how was your weekend?" The question was so casual, so normal, that Travis almost forgot to respond. It was adequate. "And yours?" "Exhausting. I had to write a 20-page paper on enzyme bonding. My brain feels like mush." Reed pulled out his materials and turned to Travis. "Actually, can I ask you something about the reading? This whole section on chemical gradients across cell membranes is confusing me." Travis pulled up the relevant chapter on his datapad. He explained the concept, how molecules move from high concentration to low concentration, how different species had evolved different membrane structures to handle different chemical environments. Reed listened intently, asking clarifying questions, nodding when pieces clicked into place. "That makes so much more sense now. Thanks." Reed paused. "You're really good at explaining this stuff. You must be acing this class. I find biology interesting. It is quite different from my primary field, which is stellar mechanics and energy systems." Reed whistled softly. "That's intense. I could barely pass basic physics." The professor began the lecture before they could continue talking, but throughout the class, Reed treated Travis exactly as he had the first day. He borrowed the stylus again. He made a quiet comment about the professor's odd pronunciation of a species name. He shared his notes when Travis missed a diagram. Small gestures, meaningless to Reed perhaps, but to Travis they were extraordinary. After class, as they packed their materials, Reed said something that changed everything. "Want to grab lunch? The noodle station is actually decent today." Travis froze. The cafeteria, the place he had not entered in over 2 years. The place where his presence caused students to abandon their meals, where whispers followed him like shadows, where he had once sat alone at a table built for 8 and watched everyone give him a wide berth. "I usually eat in my quarters," Travis said carefully. "Come on, I'm starving and I hate eating alone." Reed was already heading toward the door, clearly expecting Travis to follow. Against every instinct, Travis did. They walked across campus together, Reed talking about his chemistry professor who apparently told terrible jokes. Other students on the paths noticed them. A human and a dragon, walking side by side. Some stared. Some whispered. Reed did not seem to notice or care. The cafeteria was packed with a lunch crowd. Travis felt his wings tense against his back, an involuntary stress response. But Reed moved through the crowd confidently, got them both trays, and led them to the noodle station. They loaded their trays with food. Reed grabbed a table near the windows and sat down, gesturing for Travis to join him. Soon as Travis sat, the students at the neighboring table stood up and moved away. Not subtly. They picked up their trays and relocated across the room. Another group did the same. Within 2 minutes, their table was an island of empty space in a sea of crowded dining. Reed noticed this time. He frowned, looking around at the deliberate distance everyone maintained. What's their problem? Travis focused on his food. They are afraid. Of what? Of me. Of what my species represents. Reed set down his fork. I don't understand. So Travis explained, quietly, without looking up. He told Reed about the Dragon Wars, conflicts that happened 300 years ago when dragon clans had fought among themselves and burned 17 colony worlds in the process. How other species had intervened, how peace was eventually established, but how the fear remained. How dragons now mostly stayed on Pyraxis, their homeworld, avoiding the wider galaxy. How those few who left were treated with suspicion and kept at a distance. You are not your ancestors, Reed said firmly when Travis finished. That does not matter to most people. Then most people are idiots. Reed picked up his fork again and returned to his noodles. Humans got the same treatment when we joined the galactic community. Still do sometimes. They call us Deathworlders. Too violent, too aggressive, too emotional. Earth's gravity alone is considered extreme by most species. Our diseases could wipe out half the species in this cafeteria. Our predators would terrify them. He shrugged. We had to prove ourselves. Still proving ourselves. But judging individuals by their species is backwards thinking. He grinned at Travis. Besides, I think dragons are amazing. You can literally fly and breathe fire. That's objectively cool. Travis felt something warm in his chest, something that had nothing to do with his internal fusion core. I have not flown in 3 years. There is nowhere on campus designated for it. That's a crime. You should absolutely be allowed to fly. They finished their lunch while Reed asked questions about Pyraxis, about dragon culture, about what it felt like to soar on thermal currents. His questions were curious and genuine, without any trace of fear. When they left the cafeteria together, Travis realized something remarkable. For 1 hour, he had not felt invisible. He had felt seen. The xenobiology lab smelled of preservation chemicals and recycled air. Travis stood at their assigned workstation, carefully arranging the dissection tools in precise order. Reed arrived moments later, rolling up his sleeves and reading through the lab protocol on his datapad. Okay, so we need to map the complete respiratory system of this Kelleran filter feeder, Reed said. That's going to take a while. They had been assigned as lab partners for the semester project, and Travis still could not quite believe it was real. Around them, other student pairs worked at their stations, occasionally glancing over at the unusual partnership of human and dragon. But the looks were less hostile now, more curious than afraid. Travis made the first incision with steady precision. His claws, which so many feared, were perfectly designed for delicate work. Reed took notes, documenting each structure they exposed, asking questions about what they were seeing. The gill structures are way more complex than I expected, Reed muttered, leaning in close to examine the tissue. Look at how many filtration layers there are. Kellerans evolved in water with high particulate content, Travis explained. They need multiple filtration stages to extract oxygen efficiently. They fell into an easy rhythm. Travis's steady hands and precise measurements complemented Reed's theoretical knowledge and careful documentation. Hours passed without Travis noticing. He was too absorbed in the work, in the comfortable partnership, in the absence of tension. When the lab session ended, Reed suggested they continue working in the library. Travis agreed, and they found a quiet corner on the 3rd floor where few students ventured. They spread out their notes and specimen scans, analyzing what they had found. I'm stuck on this enzyme bonding mechanism, Reed admitted, rubbing his eyes. How does the oxygen transfer happen at this molecular level? Travis pulled up a simulation on his datapad and walked Reed through it. They spent another 2 hours going through the material, Travis explaining the chemistry, Reed connecting it to biological systems. At some point, Travis realized they had moved beyond just the lab assignment. They were studying together, helping each other across their different subjects. You should be a teacher, Reed said suddenly. You explain things better than half my professors. Most professors avoid calling on me in class, Travis admitted. They seem uncomfortable with my presence. Their loss. Reed stretched. Hey, there's a lecture series happening tomorrow night. Ethical frameworks across cultures. Want to go? Travis hesitated. Lecture series were social events, places where students mingled and discussed ideas in large groups. The idea made his scales itch with anxiety. But Reed was looking at him with such easy expectation, as if of course Travis would go, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I will attend, Travis heard himself say. The next evening, they met outside the auditorium. Students were streaming in, chattering excitedly about the guest speakers. Reed led them inside, not to the back row where Travis would have hidden, but to the middle section. They sat, and Travis tried to control his breathing as students filled in around them. The lecture was fascinating, exploring how different species approach questions of morality and ethics based on their evolutionary backgrounds. During the discussion period, Reed raised his hand and asked about how collective species reconciled individual rights. The speaker gave a thoughtful answer, and then Reed turned to Travis. What do dragons think about that? Every head in the auditorium turned. Travis felt his throat tighten, but Reed was looking at him with genuine interest, waiting for his perspective. So Travis spoke, his voice quiet at first, but growing stronger as he explained dragon philosophy on individual freedom within clan structures, on how the ability to fly influenced their concepts of personal space and autonomy. When he finished, several students actually nodded. The speaker thanked him for the insight and built on it for the next part of the discussion. No one screamed. No one fled. They simply listened and moved on. After the lecture, as they filed out, a Triloxian student approached them nervously. Excuse me, Travis. I'm in your advanced stellar mechanics class. I was wondering if I could ask you about the last problem set. The fusion core stabilization question is really confusing. Travis stared. This was the first time a non-human student had voluntarily approached him for conversation in 3 years. Reed was grinning beside him, clearly pleased. Of course, Travis managed. He spent 10 minutes explaining the problem, drawing diagrams on his datapad. The Triloxian listened carefully, asked follow-up questions, thanked him genuinely before leaving. See, Reed said as they walked back toward the dormitories. People just needed to see you as a person instead of a scary dragon. You made that possible, Travis said quietly. You sat beside me when no one else would. Reed shrugged. I just sat in an empty seat. You did the rest by being yourself. That weekend, they worked on their lab presentation together. They had to present their findings to the class, explaining the Kelleran respiratory system and what it revealed about evolutionary adaptation to aquatic environments. Travis was nervous about public speaking, but Reed split the presentation evenly between them. Just focus on the science, Reed advised during practice. Forget about the audience. When presentation day arrived, Travis did exactly that. He explained the respiratory efficiency calculations, the filtration mechanics, the evolutionary advantages. He got so absorbed in the material that he forgot to be anxious. When he finished his section, Reed gave him an approving nod, and Travis realized that a few students were actually taking notes on what he said. They received the highest marks in the class. The professor commented that their presentation exemplified true cross-species collaboration. Walking out of class that day, Reed suggested they celebrate. There's a human restaurant off campus. You ever had pizza? Travis had not, but he was learning that saying yes to Reed's invitations led to good things. So he agreed, and they headed off campus together toward another new experience. The restaurant was small, tucked between a Centauran tea house and a Vossen supply shop. The sign read, Luna's Pizza, in 3 languages, and through the window Travis could see checkered tablecloths and warm lighting. The owner, a middle-aged human woman, looked up when they entered. Her eyes widened briefly at the sight of Dragon, but she recovered quickly and smiled. Welcome. Sit anywhere you like. Reed chose a booth near the back and handed Travis a menu. Trust me on this. Get the combination with extra vegetables. Your biology can handle it, right? Dragons are omnivorous. We could digest most organic compounds. They ordered, and while they waited, Reed told stories about Earth, about cities so crowded that millions lived in single metropolitan areas, about oceans that covered most of the planet, about weather patterns that could shift from blazing heat to freezing cold in a single day. To most species, Earth sounded like a nightmare world. To Travis, it sounded fascinating. The pizza arrived, and Travis examined it carefully before taking a cautious bite. The combination of flavors surprised him. Cheese, vegetables, bread, some kind of sauce, all working together in a way that should not have been pleasant, but absolutely was. This is actually very good, he admitted. Reed laughed. Humans perfected the art of combining random ingredients and calling it cuisine. They talked for hours. Travis found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. About the crystal caves on Pyraxis where young dragons learn to fly. About the flight rituals that mark transitions into adulthood. About the loneliness of his decision to leave. How his family had not understood why he would want to study among other species when dragons had their own excellent schools. They thought I was rejecting our culture, Travis said quietly. But I wanted to prove that dragons could contribute to the wider galaxy. That we were more than our violent history. You are proving that, Reed said firmly. Every day you're here, you're showing people what dragons can be. 2 other humans entered the restaurant, spotted Reed, and headed over. Travis tensed automatically, but Reed waved them over with enthusiasm. Travis, these are my hallmates, Cassidy and Oliver. Cassidy slid into the booth with an easy smile. You're Travis. Reed talks about you constantly. Says you're the only reason he's passing quantum chemistry. Oliver nodded. He also says you can breathe actual fire, which is possibly the coolest thing I've ever heard. They treated Travis like Reed did, with casual friendliness and genuine curiosity. They asked about his major, his favorite subjects, whether he missed flying. The conversation flowed naturally, and Travis realized this was what normal friendship looked like. Multiple people, talking and joking, and including him without fear or hesitation. Cassidy mentioned the upcoming Galactic Games, an interspecies athletic competition held every semester. She was competing in zero-gravity handball. Oliver was running the endurance marathon. They invited Travis to come watch. We need more people in the human cheering section, Cassidy explained. Most species think our athletes are going to hurt themselves with our reckless style. Travis agreed to attend, something he would never have considered before meeting Reed. When they finally left the restaurant, walking back toward campus under the light of 2 moons, Travis felt a profound sense of belonging. The Galactic Games filled the athletics complex with thousands of students. Travis sat with Reed and his human friends in the cheering section, surrounded by noise and energy and excitement. Various species competed in events designed for their biological strengths. Vossans dominated the strength competitions. Centaurans excelled at agility courses. Humans competed in the endurance events, pushing themselves beyond what most species considered reasonable. During a particularly close race, Travis found himself shouting encouragement along with everyone else. A student nearby glanced over, not with fear, but with the camaraderie of shared excitement. When Cassidy's handball team won their match, the entire human section erupted in celebration, and Travis was part of it. Between events, a Kelleran student leaned over from the next section. You're in advanced stellar mechanics, right? Your paper on fusion core stabilization was brilliant. I used some of your calculations for my own research. Travis was stunned. Someone had not only read his work, but sought him out to discuss it. They talked for several minutes about energy systems and containment field theory, a genuine academic conversation. Reed watched this interaction with obvious satisfaction. Over the following weeks, small changes accumulated into something significant. Students no longer moved desks away in his classes. A study group invited him to join their review session. He politely declined, already committed to studying with Reed, but the invitation itself mattered. A professor asked him to tutor a struggling student in physics. The invisible walls that had surrounded him for 3 years were crumbling. He was still not popular, still not fully integrated into campus social life, but he was no longer isolated. And he understood now that Reed had not done this alone. Reed had given him visibility, created the first crack in the wall, but Travis's own actions had widened that crack into an opening point. One evening in the library, surrounded by datapads and notes, Travis asked the question that had been bothering him. "Why did you sit next to me that first day?" Reed looked up from his reading. "Honestly, the seat was empty. I sat down. Everyone else avoided that seat because of me." "I know." Reed set down his datapad. "But I figured I'd rather find out who you were myself than trust a bunch of scared assumptions. Plus, you looked like you needed a friend." He grinned. "And I was right. You're one of the best friends I've made here." Travis felt warmth spread through his chest. Not fire, but something equally powerful. Gratitude, belonging, friendship. "Thank you," he said simply. Reed waved it off and returned to his studying, but Travis sat for a moment longer, appreciating the remarkable turn his life had taken. All because someone chose to sit in an empty seat. News of the interspecies symposium spread across campus through official announcements and excited whispers. Students could submit joint research proposals for presentation in front of academics from across the sector. Reed burst into the library where Travis was studying, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "We should do this. We have to do this." Travis looked up from his datapad. "The symposium? Yes. Think about it. We could combine your expertise in energy systems with my biology knowledge. Study thermal regulation across extreme environment species. Compare how dragons and humans and other species manage temperature extremes." Reed was already pulling up research databases on his datapad. This could open doors for both of us. The idea was brilliant. It was also terrifying. The symposium was prestigious, which meant public, which meant hundreds of academics watching. Travis felt his wings tense against his back. But Reed was looking at him with such conviction, such certainty that this was possible, that Travis found himself agreeing. They spent the next week drafting their proposal, outlining their methodology, defining their research questions. When they submitted it, Travis tried not to think about what would happen if it was accepted. It was accepted. They threw themselves into research with intense focus. Long nights in the lab, measuring thermal tolerances, comparing molecular structures across species. Travis contributed dragon physiological data, information rarely shared outside Pyraxis. Reed coordinated with human medical databases, pulling comparisons from Earth species adapted to extreme heat and cold. Their research revealed fascinating patterns. Dragons and certain deep-sea Earth creatures shared similar heat shock proteins. Species from frozen worlds and desert worlds had evolved convergent solutions to temperature regulation. The data was elegant, surprising, publishable. As they worked, Travis noticed he was different on campus now. He walked through common areas without hunching his shoulders, without trying to minimize his presence. He made eye contact with passing students. Sometimes they even nodded in greeting. Finn, the Kelleran from Stellar Mechanics, had started joining their library study sessions. Lyra, a Centauran from another class, asked him for help with a physics problem. Small connections, but they mattered. Reed noticed the change too. "You seem more comfortable, like you actually belong here now." "Because I do," Travis said. "You made space for me to exist. I am simply filling it." They practiced their presentation repeatedly, refining their arguments, perfecting their data visualizations. Reed was a natural speaker, engaging and clear. Travis was technical and precise, but Reed coached him to speak more naturally, to share his passion for the subject rather than just reciting facts. Then, 1 week before the symposium, everything threatened to fall apart. The message arrived anonymously through the symposium feedback system. Someone had filed a complaint about their presentation. The language was formal, but the meaning was clear. Allowing a dragon to present could be threatening to other attendees. The complaint suggested Dravis withdraw and let Reed present alone. Dravis read the message 3 times, feeling all the old fears resurface. He had been foolish to think things had truly changed. He was still a dragon, still carried the weight of his species' history. Maybe he did not belong on that stage after all. Reed found him in his quarters an hour later, staring at the complaint on his screen. Reed read it, and his expression transformed from concern to fury. "This is garbage. Absolute garbage." "Perhaps they have a point," Dravis said quietly. "My presence could overshadow our research." "No." Reed's voice was hard. "I'm taking this to the organizers right now." Reed stormed to the symposium office and demanded answers. Who filed the complaint? On what grounds? The organizers were embarrassed, assured him the complaint had no merit, promised that Dravis had every right to present. But Reed was not satisfied with private assurances that he posted a message on the Academy forums, making the situation public. He explained what happened, condemned the prejudice, and made his position crystal clear. If Dravis was not welcome at the symposium, then Reed would not present either. Science did not care about fear. The response was immediate and divided. Some students supported him. Others argued that dragons were inherently dangerous. But then more voices emerged. Professors commented on Dravis's academic achievements. Students who had worked with him defended his character. Even some non-human students spoke about their own experiences with prejudice. The Vossen professor from Stellar Mechanics wrote a particularly strong statement. "Dravis is one of the most dedicated students I have taught. His species is irrelevant to his merit." Finn posted about their study sessions, how patient Dravis was in explaining complex concepts. Lyra shared that Dravis had helped her pass a difficult exam. Cassidy and Oliver both wrote about meeting him, how he defied every stereotype. The tide of opinion shifted. Support outweighed criticism, but Dravis still felt uncertain. "I should withdraw anyway," he told Reed, "to avoid controversy." "No," Reed was firm. "This is our work. We present it together or not at all." Cassidy and Oliver backed him up. Even Finn sent a message of support. Dravis realized he had something now that he never had before, people willing to stand with him. Not just Reed, but a small community. They believed he belonged there. He decided to move forward. The final week was intense. They refined every aspect of their presentation, prepared for difficult questions, practiced staying calm under pressure. The night before the symposium, Dravis could not sleep. He went to the observation deck, looking out at the stars and the ships coming and going. Reed found him there, brought 2 cups of coffee, and sat beside him in comfortable silence. They watched the galaxy turn, neither feeling the need to fill the quiet with words. Finally, Reed spoke. "Tomorrow, we show them what real collaboration looks like." Dravis nodded, feeling nervous but no longer alone. Whatever happened tomorrow, he would face it with a friend beside him. That made all the difference. The Grand Hall held 2,000 beings from hundreds of species. Dravis stood backstage with Reed, listening to the current presentation wrapping up. His heart hammered against his ribs. Through the gap in the curtain, he could see the audience, students, professors, researchers, academics from across the sector. Some were attending holographically, their shimmering forms scattered throughout the seating. In the 3rd row, he spotted 3 dragons. Visiting scholars from Pyraxis, a rare sight off-world. One met his eyes and nodded slightly. Recognition, acknowledgement, perhaps even pride. "We're next," Reed said, checking their presentation files one final time. "You ready?" "No," Dravis admitted, "but I will do it anyway." They walked onto the stage as their names were announced. The hall went quiet. Dravis could feel hundreds of eyes tracking his movement, some curious, some wary. He took his position beside the display screen and forced himself to breathe steadily. Reed opened their presentation with confidence, introducing their research question and explaining why thermal regulation across extreme environment species mattered for understanding evolutionary adaptation. His delivery was smooth, engaging, drawing the audience in. Then he transitioned seamlessly to Dravis. "My colleague will now explain our methodology and key findings." Dravis stepped forward. His voice shook slightly on the first sentence, but as he began explaining the data, his passion overtook his nerves. He walked the audience through their thermal analysis, the molecular comparisons, the surprising convergences they had discovered between dragons and deep-sea Earth creatures, between desert-adapted species and Arctic survivors. He showed videos of dragon flight thermals alongside human athletes in extreme heat. He explained protein structures with detailed diagrams. He forgot about his species, forgot about the fears and prejudices, and simply shared the science that fascinated him. The presentation flowed like they had practiced. Reed and Travis alternated smoothly, building on each other's points, demonstrating genuine collaboration. When they concluded, there was a brief silence. Then the questions began. A Centauran researcher asked about sample sizes. Travis answered with specific numbers and statistical confidence levels. A human professor questioned their temperature measurement calibrations. Reed explained their methodology and controls. A Vossen scientist wanted clarification on protein structure analysis. Together, they provided detailed responses. Not once did anyone question Travis's right to be there. Not once did anyone treat his presence as threatening. The questions were rigorous, academic, treating their work with the seriousness it deserved. Travis realized he was being evaluated as a scientist, not as a dragon. The distinction mattered profoundly. When the formal session ended, academics approached them. The dragon scholars from Pyraxis came first. The eldest, her scales gray with age, spoke quietly. "You honor our people by being here, by doing this work. Many dragons believe we should remain separate from the galaxy. You prove that we can contribute." Human researchers wanted to discuss follow-up studies. Professors from other institutions asked about publishing their findings. Students requested information about their methodology. The symposium organizers informed them that their paper would appear in the official proceedings, with potential presentation at a sector-wide conference next year. Later, after the crowds dispersed, Travis and Reed sat on the steps outside the Grand Hall. The sun was setting, painting the campus in orange and purple light. They were exhausted but satisfied. "We did it," Reed said. "We did it together," Travis corrected. "I could not have done this without you." Reed shrugged. "You would have gotten here eventually. I just sat in an empty seat." But Travis knew better. That simple choice had changed everything. It had given him visibility, created opportunity, sparked a chain of events that led to this moment. One person choosing to ignore fear had opened a door that Travis could walk through. The next semester brought more changes. 2 new dragon students enrolled at the academy, likely encouraged by news of Travis's successful symposium presentation. He reached out to them immediately, offered guidance and support. He became the mentor he had never had, helping them navigate the social complexities of being different. His friendship with Reed remained strong, but expanded naturally to include others. Finn, Lyra, Cassidy, Oliver, and several other students formed a loose study group that met weekly. They challenged each other academically, supported each other socially, and treated species differences as interesting rather than threatening. Travis still faced uncomfortable moments. Some students still stared. Some professors still seemed nervous around him. But these were exceptions now, not the rule. He was no longer invisible, no longer isolated. The academy administration contacted him with an unusual request. They wanted to feature him in recruitment materials, showing potential students that the academy truly welcomed all species. Travis agreed, but only on one condition. Reed must be featured too. "Our story is not about me overcoming prejudice alone," Travis explained. "It is about someone choosing to see past it." The academy accepted his terms. When the new semester began, Travis enrolled in advanced quantum mechanics. He arrived early and chose a seat in the middle of the room. Not the back corner where he had hidden for years, but the middle where engaged students sat. As the room filled, he noticed a young Triloxian student enter, looking nervous and uncertain. Triloxians were rare at the academy. Their methane-based biology required special accommodations, made integration difficult. Students filled the room, but seats near the Triloxian remained conspicuously empty. The student looked increasingly isolated increasingly alone. Dravis recognized that expression immediately. He had worn it himself for 3 years. He gathered his materials and moved to the empty seat beside the Triloxian. "Hello, I am Dravis. Mind if I sit here?" The Triloxian's eyes widened in his environmental suit. "I am Petrin. Please, yes." As the professor began the lecture, Dravis felt something profound settle in his chest. Understanding. Purpose. Hope. He thought about that first day when Reed sat beside him, how one simple choice had changed everything. Sometimes changing the galaxy started with choosing the empty seat. Sometimes the most radical act was simple kindness. Sometimes all it took was one person willing to see another person instead of species. Dravis looked over at Petrin, who was already taking notes with less tension in his posture, and smiled slightly. This was just the beginning.